Greetings on this Friday of the third week of Lent. The Station of the Cross that I'd like to look at today is Jesus meets the woman of Jerusalem. In our Gospel from Mark we read, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." On his journey towards Calvary, Jesus meets the weeping woman of Jerusalem. Women who today still symbolize the weeping of all those whose hearts are broken with suffering. Women who weep for weeks on end, as if their sorrows could be drowned in a sea of tears. Women who weep inwardly and are crushed by the weight of their grief. Women who retain the emotional scars of their suffering long after their problems are seemingly solved. They represent women across the world and closer to home who experience unacceptable levels of physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological abuse and disrespect. Women who experience violence, girls whose lives are disrupted by abuse, LGBTI women who find that they are discriminated against by communities, women who experience violence from spouses and partners, violence in the home, sexual violence in the wider community, structural violence like patriarchy and male superiority. Women are still weeping because of what is happening in their communities, because of the unfair burdens that they have to carry. They are still weeping because of the inequalities that they experience in their lives. They're weeping over the continued suffering of their children. Too many women still die in childbirth. Too many women do not have equitable access to health care and to economic opportunities. And yet, women remain the backbone of our families, of our community, and of wider society. Working in their homes, working outside of the home for their families, caring for their children, and then in retirement, having to care for their children, their children's children, and for the children of the wider family. Women carried in times of oppression and suffering an even greater burden, but they remained strong. We remember that saying, "You strike the woman, you strike the rock." They were more than just primary carers in the time of AIDS. And now with the pandemic, they continue to carry further worries for their own parents, for their children, and for their grandchildren. And yet, despite being considered the backbone of our families and of our community life, women are still considered to be unequal to men. The 14-year-old Anne Frank, a teenage Jewish girl whose diary of her family's years in hiding during the German occupation of the Netherlands, a diary which has become a classic of war literature, wrote, "One of the many questions that has often bothered me is why women have been and are still are thought to be inferior to men. It's easy to say it's unfair, but that's not enough for me," she says. "I'd really like to know the reason for this great injustice." How can we continue today to say that we live this great commandment to love God and to love neighbor, when over 50% of the human race is not treated equally, is not treated with dignity and respect, is not treated fairly? So for today, let me do something about that. Let me say thank you to the woman in my life to whom I owe a debt of gratitude. For I lose nothing in saying thank you for what they have given to me.